Hello, I'm Rafael Ortiz from the Department of Applied Linguistics at Universidad Politécnica de Valencia, and in this learning video we're going to see some structures useful to express trends and changes in technical English, something which is very important. These are the contents of the presentation. We will have a look at some important ways of expressing trends and changes in English. And then we will focus on the two most important structures, adjective plus noun and verb plus adverb. And then we will have a look at some of the words and expressions that can be used with the same purpose. The objectives are first to know and use the most important structures and expressions for trends and changes. For example, useful in describing graphs and visuals. It is also important to be able to describe different trends, upward or downward, in a precise and accurate way. Normally, to talk about trends in English, the verb tenses that are more commonly used are the past simple and the past perfect. The past simple is used when the trend happened in the past and is now finished, is over, and is normally associated with several expressions such as last month, in January, etc. Here we have a couple of examples. In April, the unemployment rate rose to 1 million. In 2010, car production increased by 5%. In these cases, we have a trend that finished in the past. On the other hand, we use the past perfect every time the trend started in the past, but it's now going on. That means it's not finished yet. Is normally associated with some particles and expressions such as for, followed by a period, since, over the past, several years, etc. Here we have a couple of examples. The number of investors has declined since 2009, or our economy has grown fast over the past 3 years. The two most important structures that are used in technical English to express changes and trends are adjective plus noun and verb plus adverb. And two of the most widely used verbs to describe an upward movement are to rise and to raise. Notice the pronunciation here. You have to make a difference between to rise without an object. This verb hasn't got an object. For example, petrol prices rose in May, and raise, which needs an object. For example, with the same meaning. The oil industry raised prices in May. We have to take this into account. Now we're going to focus on these structures. We will start with the structure adjective plus noun. In this case, the characteristic and nature of the change is normally expressed by the adjective, and the kind of movement, up or down, is expressed by the noun. Here we can see some examples differentiated in green, blue or red, depending on the adjective or the noun. There was a sudden increase in temperature. The graph shows a slight decrease in electricity consumption. In August, we noticed a moderate fall, or this was followed by a gradual decline. We can see that this is an extremely common structure to describe trends. Another very important structure is that comprising a verb and an adverb. In this case, the degree and nature of the change is expressed by the adverb, here in red, and the kind of change is expressed by the verb, here signaled in blue color. Here we can see three examples to illustrate that. Over the past 2 years, the number has dropped significantly. Sales increased slightly in summer, or last month the rates rose sharply. Here we have examples of, for example, in graphs or visual information. Sometimes we need to describe movements of a certain trend. And here we have 7 different situations, for example, in a graph, but not necessarily in a graph. It can these expressions can also be used in under other circumstances. In situation 1, we have here possible expressions that we can use. Something can pick up sharply. We can see a significant rise. Something suffers a rapid growth. Something rises sharply or experiences an upward turn or increases sharply, as we can see. We have a combination of the structures that we have seen so far. In situation 2, there's a difference. We can see a gradual rise or that something increases slightly. In situation 3, it keeps constant or it remains constant at a certain rate or number. In situation 4, we can see that a certain variable can experience a sharp fall or is cut dramatically or cuts dramatically or decreases sharply. The next situation, 5, we can use expressions such as to see a steady decline. Steady, not sharp in this case. In situation 6, a different one, we can use expressions such as something recovers or something experiences an upturn, going down and then up again. And the last situation is a more variable. We can use expressions such as something fluctuates widely before leveling out. Normally, the following words and expressions can describe changes and can be nouns or verbs. The most typical ones for an upward trend are increase or rise. And to describe a downward trend, we have decrease, fall, or decline. Here we have some structures that we can use with these words and verbs. To increase or decrease, by is followed by the amount or quantity describing that change. The same with an, increase, decrease of, in this case used as nouns, followed by the amount or quantity describing the change again. And we can use again them as nouns in the following expression: an increase or decrease in this case followed by the noun describing the variable that is experiencing the change. Or we can use make a change in or to, followed by the noun describing the variable that changes. Here we have some examples. We increase the temperature by 4 degrees Celsius. We noted the increase in performance. We noted an increase of 4 degrees Celsius in the temperature. We need to make changes to or in the landing gear, or we made a change in our design. Normally when we express a change, the preposition used, such as in the first example, is by. Another way of expressing changes is using process verbs such as change, deteriorate, grow, slow down, widen, strengthen, darken the eyes. And many of these verbs actually end with the ending en, or prefixes such as d. Here are some examples. We are lengthening the wing. They are strengthening the landing gear. The structure was weakened through friction. Manufacturers are upgrading engine performance. This will enhance the overall design. The cabin will be widened by 1.2 meters, or they boosted the fuel tank capacity. As we can see, these verbs establish the change by means of a process. They are process verbs. They describe a process and therefore a change. In conclusion, it's very important to express changes and trends in a clear and accurate way. In English, there are different ways, combinations of verbs, nouns, adverbs, and adjectives that can describe naturally the degree and the nature of changes. And this is very important, for example, when describing graphs or statistical information, etc. Expressing changes and trends is especially relevant when describing certain visual information such as graphs, although not necessarily only in these circumstances. That's why it is very important in technical and academic English. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much for your attention.